Hello and welcome back to the Intuitively Led podcast. I am your host, Julie Chandler, psychic, medium, connected to the universe. I don't know, all the spiritual labels. That is me. I want to talk a little bit today about psychic abilities. So this can apply to you whether you are a business owner or whether you are just quote unquote normal, living your daily life. You don't have to be all the way down the rabbit hole. But what I really want to address today and speak about today is what it's like to be living intuitively led, being psychic, working as a tarot reader and a medium, and what that looks like in my day to day, because it may surprise some of you. Now, if you've been listening to me for a while or following me for a while, then you probably are very aware that I don't fit the stereotype of psychic. I don't fit what you might think to be psychic. I don't wear some chiffon long thing. I don't have a crystal ball, although I do have a ball crystal, but it's not a crystal ball in the same sense that it would be on TV in Hollywood, etc., etc. And the reason I wanted to share today about what it's like being psychic, what it's like for me as a medium, as someone who meets random people to be able to give them readings and connect them to information and to the universe, and what that looks like. And I also want to touch on, if I was going back in time and I was about to start my journey again, what I might do differently this time around. So for me, as a psychic, I do pick up information. Now, I have said this before. If you've done my intuition quiz, you will know that I classify 4 main senses. There are other ways of picking up energy, but the 4 main senses, and I put them into animals because it's much more fun than sitting there saying clairaudient. Like that just sounds meh. But I'm like, actually, you have the deer intuition, which sounds much more fun. And I'm an animal lover, so I love really connecting into that kind of energy. But there is very much this thing for me of being able to connect to all of them. Now, my strongest one is my knowing. Sometimes I just know things, but I can see things, I can hear things, and I can feel things physically. Physically is probably the one that developed much quicker for me, especially when I went through my Reiki training. I became much more in tune with what was happening in my body and realizing that those twinges and those nudges and that tenseness sometimes isn't anything to do with me, and it's to do with other people. And that's the information I need to share. So let me just give an example. This weekend, I went and read for 5 amazing women. It was a collective booking, and I just had one person's name. I never actually asked for the other girls' names. Sorry, I didn't. I forget names anyway. So even if people had told me their name, I would have forgotten. But these women were beautiful. They were amazing. Their vibration was great when I walked in. They were all like collectively together. They all worked together. And reading for them individually was such a great experience. It's kind of like a party vibe, but sometimes tarot can kind of bring up emotions and things like that. So I'm always very aware of that when people are like in these high spirits, and I'm like, I'm coming in and one of you's going to cry. Like it just always happens. It's not something you can kind of like prepare people for, really, I guess. I mean, maybe I could, but it kind of puts a damper on their afternoon, as it were. But as an example, for me, how I pick up information, when I'm driving there, I've got the window down. And even as I'm driving, I'm like aware of things around me, and I'm aware of sensations. So I was very aware of this collective energy from spirit. It felt very much like there was like this excitement and celebration, like we're getting together. This is fantastic. And then I felt a presence in the chair next to me. Now, this isn't the first time that I have sensed somebody sat next to me, and it's very much a knowing. I can't see them, I can't feel them, but I just know they're there. And I can tell you that it's a female in this example. And in the past, I've often sensed my guide, who is my granddad. So I've known he's there. I can sense him, like he has this great sense of humor. He used to appear to me in the car multiple times when I used to live in London and we used to drive around. He is a South London boy through and through. Now, for those of you who don't know, I never met my granddad. My granddad died when my dad was a boy. Somewhere, the number changes every time I ask about this, but somewhere between the ages of 2 and 6. So I often just say when he was 4, smack bang in the middle, law of averages, right? He died when my dad was a boy. So my dad didn't know him, didn't really know much about like his personality, what he was like. But yet I feel like I know him and I have this really deep connection with him because I can sense him and I've seen him around. Okay, let's put it that way. And for me, having this person in the car, I was just like, okay, great. You're coming with me. You're clearly for this reading. This is something that needs to come up and come through. When I arrived at the property, I actually started making notes because I sort of wrote down a name and the name was wrong. The name didn't correlate from that moment when I actually expressed it to people. I thought it was a mother energy, but as the reading went on, it came clear that it was actually a grandmother energy, but she kind of had that mother matriarch like vibe to her. So that kind of resonated with them when I was explaining that. But even that, as an example, this is something that came up before the reading. So most people might not necessarily associate it with where you're going, what you're doing. If you're out and about and you sense something with you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's negative. If you walk into a room and you sense that there's an energy in there, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And this was also the case for the house that I was at. The lady who I then did a reading for, like of one of these 5, her house, like she has seen somebody in the house. But there was a very like, she's like, it's woken me up, it's scared me kind of thing. She's very jocular with it, it's very funny. But obviously, I've been in that position and I know many people have been in that position where they've woken up at night and they have seen shadow figures or something in the room. And sometimes that's very, very scary until you can tap in and understand what that energy is. So I explained to her, I was like, actually, he's quite excited to interact with you. That's the kind of energy I got. It was kind of like this rush of energy. And I get that that's like him sort of running towards her. But I also got this sense of, he didn't want her to necessarily be in the house on her own all the time. And he was very kind of old school with his energy. And I could sense this chair. I was like, I'm sitting in a chair. I can feel this chair. So again, that's another way that I'm picking up energy. I'm not mentally seeing him in a chair, but I feel like I'm sitting in a chair and I want to be prim and proper in my chair with my arms on the armrests. And I'm sort of moving left and right when I'm doing it. And at the end of the reading, she confirmed that there are 2 chairs that were left in the house from the previous owners and they spin. And so she thinks that he's linked to that. But this might not make sense when you're saying it. It may not make sense when you say it out loud. And this is the thing. Sometimes when you're speaking things out loud as a psychic, it doesn't make sense to you. But 9 times out of 10, when people are learning their intuition, when they're learning how the universe communicates with them, and especially when they're working with people. So whether you're a Reiki practitioner, a healer, whether you are a tarot reader, a medium, sometimes it's scary to say the thing out loud because you're like, this doesn't make any sense and I don't know where to put it. Another example, one of the other ladies that I was speaking to, we did a mediumship connection and I said, there is a link here with smiley faces. And I said, I don't know what that means, where that's coming from. There is just a link here with this deceased person and smiley faces. And she was very shocked because at one point after the passing, there was a smiley face drawn on the mirror in steam. And it couldn't have been one of her children because they couldn't reach it. They were too small to reach it. And she didn't know where it had come from. And at the time, they had mentioned collectively as a family that they thought it was the past son that she had lost. So if I'd have sat there and said, smiley faces, that doesn't make any sense. That's not any proof to give them. That's not any validation for them. It's not connected to anything. And if I didn't say that, she would not have had that validation of that was a real moment. That was a real connection to the other side, to past loved ones. She would not have received that. And her sister, who was sitting there as well, would not have also picked up and received that message. That message needed to be heard. And that's why I picked up this. It was, I could see in my mind's eye, those like smiley face stickers, the yellow ones. I'm sort of going back to the Forrest Gump imagery. Like that was what I saw. And when I was writing, so what I do is sometimes I write down words and things like that. And I'd started writing, doing the 2 lines for the eyes, and was about to do the smiley face and said, there's something with smiley faces. Like, what is that? So this is why I want to share this with you, of the things that you think that come in very, very quickly and then disappear. They are important. Just because you can't always connect them to something doesn't mean it's not an intuitive hit. It doesn't mean that it's not a message that needs to be heard. So even if you're working with your intuition for yourself, for your life, for your choices, your journey, and what you're doing, writing down these moments, writing down these things. So even, again, I love to come back to signs, because asking for signs from the universe is so easy. It's such a great thing to do. So asking for a sign from the universe, or having a sign or a symbol that you see, you know, if there's something you see over and over again and you're like, I think it's connected to this, I think it's connected to that, or I'm asking for a sign and I received X, Y, and Z, having that, but also writing it down, writing down what that sign is. And when you see it, writing down what you think it means, writing down and expressing what else is happening at that time. You know, so maybe there's stress around money, as an example. And I like to give this example because I often, when I'm stressed with money, I often get bubbles. And I don't just mean like soap sud bubbles. I mean like kids playing blowing bubbles. And there is a great story about when I was at work one day and I was struggling with money at this time. I was working in a doggy daycare place and they had like a glass front window, and I was in the back and I was sat on a sofa, and there was a couple of other people there. And I saw this massive bubble the size of my head floating down the road. So it was like the middle of the window as it floated by. And I sat there and was just like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And I forgot about it for a little while. Then when I went back to my car, somebody had hit my car. So there was damage to the car. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot afford this. I cannot afford this. I think I just paid out for a holiday. I was in debt at the time. You know, London life, right? Like everything's expensive. You go outside, it costs you money. And at that time, I was just, I just cannot do this. I cannot do this. I cannot do this. And then I clicked. I was like, that's what the bubble was for. I was like, the bubble is telling me it's okay. And I sat in the car for a minute, and then someone came up and knocked on the window and they said, I'm really sorry we hit your car. And it was 2 young boys. And I thought that whoever had hit my car had like gone off and that it was never resolved, and like it would never be resolved. And the universe had warned me with this bubble beforehand, like, it's going to be okay. Like this money thing, it's fine. It's not a problem. And I didn't have to pay for a penny because they didn't want to go through their insurance because they were young. So they had a hire van and they couldn't, it was too big for them. And they'd smacked into my car, and basically they wanted to pay for it so that they didn't have to pay the excess through their hire company, which would have cost them more. So they paid and I never had to pay a penny. A miracle, an absolute miracle, because in that moment they could have driven off, they could have left, which is what most people do in London. I'm not going to lie to you. This, you know, if you're listening outside of London and you're like, no, Good Samaritans, they leave their number. No, they don't in London. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I mean, there's also that thing where people put fake numbers. So they're like, oh, I'm really sorry I hit your car. I'm writing this so that people who have seen me think that I'm leaving my number. I'm not. Okay, bye. That's happened. I know people that that's happened to. But this bubble gave me that thing of like, okay, it's fine. Everything's fine. If you're worrying about money, it's fine. And that has been a continuous theme for me now. And that is, again, me listening to the universe, listening to the signs that the universe is giving me. And I wrote that down and I explored it. And I said, what was happening? I was struggling with money at that point. I was worried about it beforehand. I was wondering where money was going to come from. And then I was worried, I'm not going to be able to afford this car fixing, et cetera, but it's fine. Everything is fine. So the universe talks to us in that way, and that is part of your connection to the universe, your language with the universe. And I want you to be able to explore that. So when you do see signs, when you do feel things near you, when you do have a physical sensation in your body, when you do have vivid dreams, it's about analyzing them. It's about asking not only what does it mean, but what's happening in your life? What's happening in the broader sense? What's happening in a wider circle? Because that's important. What I have realized is that it has taken me a very long time to fully sit in the fact that I am psychic. And I want to address that today, because the more I do sit in it and say, yeah, fuck it, I am psychic. I have mediumship abilities. I can connect to past people. I can connect to energy. I can transform energy with healing. And the more I sit in that and really sit firm in that power of like, yeah, I learned this. I can do this. The more it makes sense. So the more I own it, the more it makes sense. The more I sit in its power, the more I can trust it. And that is something that if I went back to the beginning, I would tell myself over and over again. I would tell myself, jump. When you see the signs, jump. When you feel the feeling, jump. Do the thing that the universe is telling you to do. Quieten your mind and jump. This is something that I tell my clients and that I ask of my students all the time. It's about action. Action is so important when it comes to intuition. And this is something that I would tell myself as a younger person many years ago, when I was starting to dabble with things, when I was looking at cards, when I was exploring how intuition works for me and what it means for me. I would jump. I would jump and run. I would do all of it. I wouldn't just dip my toe in. I would go full force, because the more I trust and say, do you know what? This has never steered me wrong. Not one time has this steered me wrong. I believe in this. And I knew that then, but I didn't stand in that power. Now, I'm not saying that being psychic is powerful. I mean, it is, but owning who the hell you are, that's power. Owning every single fiber of what you are and what you are about is power. It's your personal power. So me saying I'm psychic, I can talk to dead people. I can see the future. I can read tarot and tell you all about yourself. I can tap into your energy and feel physical sensations in my body because I'm psychic. That's how I work. That's how I operate. And that's what I bring to things. That's what I bring to my tarot readings. That's what I bring to all of my readings, my Reiki readings and healings. That's what I bring to that. It's what I bring into my business coaching, my psychic abilities. This isn't just about teaching you to trust your intuition. This is about using me as a conduit who can fully trust it so that you can start trusting it. This is not about just patting someone on the back and being like, it's okay, that's definitely your intuition. It's being like, yeah, that's your intuition because I can tell you X, Y, and Z as well. That's what it's about for me. And if I'd have known or trusted this years ago, God, only God knows where I would be. But at the same time, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens in perfect divine timing. But that is what I would do. If I was on the cusp of like doing something or leaning more into being connected and psychic and intuitive, or whatever terminology you want to use, if I was on the cusp, I would leap a lot more. I would say a lot more. If I was doing a reading, if I was doing Reiki, I would say a lot more of what I was seeing, feeling, and sensing. I wouldn't censor myself. I wouldn't hold back, because I've done that a lot in the past, especially when I first started, like Reiki sessions. I'm like, does this person really want to know that I can see someone here? Do they want to know that I can feel this? Like, I always have this one example. And if you're listening, I won't give away too many details, but I did a Reiki session for somebody once, and I just kept getting this reference to a monk. And I don't mean like a Buddhist monk. I mean like a Friar Tuck, Robin Hood, old school UK monk. And I didn't know what it was. Then I'm like, I'm just getting a reference to monks and I'm talking Friar Tuck. And it turned out that 1, they lived down the road from a monastery. 2, they lived in Nottinghamshire, which is where Friar Tuck is and Robin Hood were. But they also had a link, and it made sense to them if I was like, do you have a guide that is potentially a monk? Could that make sense to you? And there was multiple things, but I nearly didn't tell them. In the session that happened, this was remote and it was so we were corresponding by email. I picked that up and it was in my notepad. I gave the information of the physical body. This is what I'm feeling here, there, and everywhere. This is how you can navigate that and move forward. And then there was sort of a back and forth. And eventually I was like, I will say this as well, there was this. But it had to be that back and forth for me to be comfortable enough to be like, okay, this person's potentially receptive to me saying that this is here. Whereas now I'm like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm getting. And I will openly say, this might not make sense to you, but I've got to say it. I've got to put it out there because I'm now standing in that power. And that is what I want for people. Because as well, in your business, you have that ability. You have all of these things that come through to you. But if you're not standing in your power, you're not launching, you're not putting that email out, you're not being present and visible on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. There are things that hold you back when you're not standing in your power. Now, there are things that hold you back in other areas, right? So it's not just a sign of I'm not saying, oh, you didn't post for 2 weeks on Instagram, so therefore you're not in your power. Because time has a constraint and energy and availability, all of that is important. But when you're not aligned and in your power with your intuition and your connection, you're not moving in the right direction in the way that you should be. You're not taking that action. You're not leaping. You're not jumping. You're not running. And that's what I want for people. Whether you're a life coach, whether you're a Reiki practitioner, crystal healer, tarot reader, whether you have a marketing business, a VA business, whatever it is, you can use your intuition and you can connect more. And that is what I want for you. I'm going to leave that there for this week. I hope that having a little glimpse into what it's like for me as a tarot reader, a medium, who can connect to people, past loved ones, spirits, angels, and guides to bring out messages. I hope hearing that shows you how simple it is. And I don't mean it's simple to trust it, but I mean that how the information is available is so, so simple. I didn't have to sit there and meditate to connect in. I was just driving and that information was there. That sense that someone was next to me was just there. And that is available to you to trust at any time. So I hope you do. Until next time.